Bonsoir à tous, and welcome to Nik Zielonka. Thank you for coming today to present your work for the shifters for the Grand Genève. 2 words on Nik. Nik is coming from Germany. He's at the University of Geneva, making a PhD, 4th year of the PhD in Renewable Energy Systems, if I correctly remember. And he will present us one of his research during this stage at the University of Geneva. So we are listening to you, and I give you the floor.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and yeah, thanks for coming. Yeah, it's actually not going to be only one work. I mean, it's mostly focused on one work, but I'll put it a bit into context of some also more recent studies that we have. And yeah, I present actually work that carried out during my PhD. And yeah, but I also want to give credit to my colleagues in Wien and Melina Tudevita, who did this really Swiss study that I present mostly today. Yeah, together with me. So yeah, I guess I do not have to give too much context, but nevertheless I want to do to be sure that we're all on the same page and that you kind of understand what our starting point was and what our way of thinking also was, and what to be expected out of these projections that we come up with and what not. So I mean, yeah, that's a figure. There's a lot of them, but this is from a study from the International Energy Agency. Basically, what I really like about this is, how kind of really nicely it shows how quickly different sectors in the energy system have to decarbonize in order to reach the net zero emission targets that the countries have. And this one, is on global level, but you can also have this on other levels for sure. And you already see that, for example, electricity, the carbon footprint is really high, but that really has to go down quickly to reach net zero by 2050. But there's also other sectors, so like really industry, transport, buildings, and that's also why we have a bit we'll focus a bit on different technologies that go a bit across or are part of different sectors. So we know kind of how it has to be. It's agreed by different countries to get there. So there's different models, and this one is also actually from the same work from the International Energy Agency on the global level, kind of translating what this means in terms of technologies. So you can see that on the one side, there's really this fossil fuels that really have to be used massively less, best not at all. And at the same time, other technologies, and mostly renewable technologies, that really have to ramp up quickly. And you see here in orange, for example, solar, but also wind in blue, to really take it up and really still supply enough electricity or transport and others for the system, exactly to be able to have this energy transition. And this one is on the global level, but I mean, for sure, there's also on the European level. It's EU 27, so it's without Switzerland, but I'll get to that. And it's basically the same picture as before on the global level. Really, also wind and solar PV is really that has to be increased quickly and massively. And here I'm really just focusing, really have an example just for the electricity sector. However, you can really translate this also into electric vehicles, right, for the transport sector, heat pumps or other technologies in the heating sector, and so on and so forth. It's really just a representative idea to get the sense of it. And what I guess you're also familiar with is, that's now from the European level to the Swiss level. These are the energy perspective 2050 plus. So basically what's been agreed on also for the energy transition. And there's been calculations in how far the different technologies have to supply electricity in Switzerland, and no surprise, the same as before, solar PV really has to supply a lot of electricity in the future. So now I've been really talking a about okay where we have to go, but our starting point is then but what's actually realistic? Can we be that quickly? Can we really get this electricity by solar PV or other technologies in the future? And that's really why we say okay, there's a really strong need for having realistic projections, or at least get closer to it, get a better picture, a better understanding of what's realistic. And if we kind of then can start to look on is, okay, how it's been in the past, so what are the trends at the moment, and for solar PV, for example, there's the statistics by Swiss Solar, where you see a bit the sales of solar PV of the last years, and you see like in the years 2010 to 2017, 18, 19, it's been really kind of the same rate, how solar PV has been actually like bought on the market by individuals, and so this graph here really shows like the rate, so how much per year, and we see like in the last years it's really becoming more and more, so solar PV is much more sold in the previous years in Switzerland, and overall at the moment we kind of get to almost 7 gigawatts solar PV at the moment installed in Switzerland. However, here, I mean, it always gets a bit an indication, okay, it's getting quicker, so there's good dynamics, how we would say that. However, we still don't really know, okay, is it gonna like kind of continue linearly, or will it actually like be even quicker, will the weight be more, or will we actually like get to like similar than the years of 2010s, that it actually flattens. And that's why we say, okay, well, we need these projections, and we also really have to take into account different dynamics, how it's could be in the future. And just one thing before I get a bit into the details, how we do that is just, I really want to make sure I'm not going too much into the methods, but I think there's still some things where I think there's some takeaways for you to kind of understand. So if we would, for example, here just like fit kind of whatever model to this kind of installation rates or like cell rates, we have like problems that we have different models, and there's like one example I really like from actually a good colleague from Sweden. Where they didn't focus in their study on this aspect, but in their appendix they have a nice figure where you see like a an orange model and the blue model, and what you see in the middle figure, or like the right figure, is if you would fit this model to the same data, you would be kind of equally good. So you really see in the middle here that they really fit very well. However, they really, in the future, would be really different in what they project, where the different capacity is going to be. And this one is on the global level, but I think it's a good example to show it's not just straightforward to just apply one model, to just say, okay, this is a good like linear or logistic or whatever model. I'll get into the details of that, but so that's really the thing that we really have really difficulties in identifying which models are the best. At the same time, also if you just have one curve, so if, for example, if you take out the orange curve or the blue curve, you would probably trust a lot in this one curve, in this one value, and there's different studies showing exactly that there's overconfidence. However, we see that these differences, and especially, it becomes especially important for what we call granular energy technologies. And these are technologies that are small, that are modular, so really like solar PV heat pumps that are bought like on an individual level, where it's not different institutions or big companies that buy large capacities, but where it's really a lot of what we also call actors, so really like one as an individual making the decision, do I want to install PV on my roof or not? And it's not like, a company buying a big, like building a huge hydropower or nuclear or coal power plant or whatsoever. And that makes it really difficult to predict what's going to be in the future, because otherwise we can just like say, okay, this is what the companies want to install in the future, they have their plans, but we don't really know what individual plans are from individuals. So And this a bit as a background is really the starting point where we said, okay, we need to have something that's more robust. So we want to be more realistic, but also really more robust. And this 4 kind of aspects that I want to cover here are like a bit the background and the methods, then really focusing on the Swiss municipalities and on the municipality level, but then also like Switzerland as a country in its whole. And then just Europe, but really focusing a bit, putting Switzerland in the European context. So I'm not talking about all the different countries. But yeah, I'll mostly focus on the Swiss parts in the middle. However, really just for your understanding, some key things on the projections. So I keep this short because that's basically what I said before. We really want to know a bit, okay, what is more realistic. So we want to have different probabilities of what we can reach in the future. We want to take into account the diversity of models, we evaluate that, and we want to have this really as at different levels of spatial resolution. So it's really basically summarizing what I just showed you before. We take 12 different basic diffusion models for this. This is a bit detailed now, but just so that you're aware from what I showed you before for this blue and blue and orange curve. These are different models, and these are also part of ours. But yeah, we take into account these different ones, and I think most important now is that the results now also present are on solar PV, heat pumps, and battery electric vehicles in Switzerland and on municipality level. So really each municipality of Switzerland will have a specific projection. And yeah, maybe you know that the number of municipalities changed over years, but when we started 2 years ago, it was 2,148, some merged, so it's getting a bit less, but they are all still represented. And yeah, so starting with that, the method I really want to keep short. However, so the idea there is really we look at the past data, so really our projections work on what have we seen in the past. So we take these different municipalities in Switzerland, look at how much of the technologies of solar PV, heat pumps, battery electric vehicles they have registered over the last, well, they have registered in the last years, and see how it changed. So there could be like some municipalities that are kind of growing slower, and some really jumping up now, so really having higher speeds. And then we do some model fitting, and here what is important is for you to know is that these fits that we do, they're constrained by the installation potential. So they cannot go higher to what's meant to be realistic. And just to give you some ideas, I guess you know maybe the Sonnendach data set for solar PV, which says how much solar PV could be in theory installed maximum in a municipality on roofs or on facades also. And for buildings, it's basically the maximum number of buildings, and for the battery electric vehicles, we assume, okay, we cannot have more battery electric vehicles than we have cars. I mean, I guess that's straightforward, but so that's already kind of like a way how we get to being more realistic. Then I really don't go into detail here. We take like probabilistic approach out of that. We do a bit like measuring, scoring, a bit how good these projections have been in the past, to basically know how good these models will be and how reliable these models are for the future. And then we get into what we say like a weighted model that takes into account different models and whatever to like have very robust or most robust projection in the future. And the next ones really will be just showing, and the results will show these projections, because the rest is really just some testing and just to make sure in this like a machine room, let's say, to be like more realistic and more robust. One quick note, but very important, is that this study takes into account like only the current dynamics and contextual conditions, because we look at the past data and we project that onwards. So we do not say, okay, what if in 2 years there's going to be new policies that will, like, I mean, you're aware of the next vote in Geneva or what would happen if everyone has to install solar PV. That's something we're not taking into account. This model is really like based on how it looks at the moment, the trends, and basically shows then, do we need more policies or do we need less policies? Exactly. So just one last thing before I get to the projections to see what the results are. kind of two takeaways of what that you basically can trust a bit more, what I just said before, and the motivation that we want to have a probabilistic approach. In the same study, we really found out that we're also more accurate. So it's not only that we use a lot of models instead of one model, but we can also, with this knowledge that we have from this testing, we can even be really more robust, and that's what we can say, and be more realistic and more close to what we actually see. Yeah, so I'm really not going into detail about this table, but that's basically a table that has the different scores, and basically the worse the scores, the more red the different models are. But yeah, it kind of compares the probabilistic approaches and deterministic approaches. And at the same time, we also really see this underestimation problem of deterministic projections that we can avoid with probabilistic methods. And that's a bit similar to what you've seen with the orange and the blue curve. We really have problems with some model that they really they do not really grow, let's say. But there's other models that still kind of project some growth, and that's why, if we take all of these different kind of scenarios into account, if we call them scenarios, we are really better. And however, it's not the case that probabilistic projections are always kind of better. We definitely also have issues that we have different probabilistic projections, that basically some projections can say, okay, everything is possible, which is also not really helpful. If we just know, okay, between no growth to very high growth, we don't really know. But also what can happen is overconfidence, so that we say, okay, this is going to be exactly like this, and then it's going to be likely that the actual value will be outside this feasibility space. So just really something to really keep in mind, that we do our best, but there's always really these trade-offs. And that's, I think, really just something I wanted for you to keep in mind, and to know that it's really important that we weigh all these different models and not just rely on one projection model. So whenever you see really single values that are projected, I hope you always look for sensitivities at least, or kind of other information to back that up. All right, long story, getting to the understanding of how it is, but now we get a bit more to the kind of fun part of seeing how it's actually going to look like. So this is the map of 2023. It's when we did the latest update of our projections, and this is just the example of solar PV, how it's been installed, and yeah, probably it doesn't surprise you, but we really around this around bigger cities. It's a Zurich winter tour, and also a bit in Normandy, Lausanne. But really, in this Midlands and Switzerland, we have more capacities installed. Not that much in the Alps, also not that much in the Jura Mountains. But it's kind of how it is at the moment. But we want to know how it's going to be in the future, right? So we can pick any of these municipalities now, and I just pick, for example, this one here. This one's the municipality of Thun, and we can have these projections. And yeah, just to quickly explain how these projections look like. So we have the past data, so this is until 2023, how many solar PV capacity has been installed in the municipality of Thun. And then we have this kind of uncertainty cone for the future. And you can read it so the lower the value, the more likely is it that you're going to reach or exceed this value, and the higher up you are, the less likely it is that you're going to reach that. I think that's straightforward, that the higher the value is, we have to really bridge this gap, right? So the more difficult is it to get there. And the center really is okay, where it's kind of equally likely to exceed or to reach that level. You can also convert this, or it's how we got there, is quantile. So we have a lot of projections, basically. That's how this uncertainty cone is created. And this median, so it's also the quantile 0.5 or 50%, is the center. So that means 50% of the projections say it's going to be lower, 50% of the projections say it's going to be higher. So by this we say, okay, this where it's darkest blue will mean this is the kind of most likely value that's projected by the different by these projections and that we have included in this probabilistic projection. And what we can then also do, and there's one study, for example, from the municipality of Thun, where they say where the municipality has to go to reach kind of the targets, to reach the required capacities, and we can just basically map this on this figure. And here we can see, okay, it's probably a bit like not yet. It doesn't look like it's going to be reached, but they're very close. So if the dynamics increases, if there's better policies, it's actually quite likely that they can do it. So it's kind of close enough. It's not really far off. Exactly. So and this is really just an example. I'll show you the results also for heat pumps and battery electric vehicles. And like one interesting thing I think is here to see a bit how much of the potential has been used or will be used by the different municipalities based on these projections. And these figures here, like there's in theory different colors for different years, but the one in green, really on top, will be kind of the highest level reached at some point, like in 2050. And you can see here, like across all these different 2,000 municipalities, what kind of the percentages they have installed by them. So that means there's like some municipalities here where they reach 80 to 90% of installing solar PV in their municipality of what they can in theory install. Where there's other municipalities where it's kind of only like staying until 20%. So they would really have still unused potential along the 2050. And similar for heat pumps and battery electric vehicles. So they really see, okay, there's still, it's not that we are limited by these potentials that we get, for example, from solar, from Sonnendach or others. So it's really not the problem that we need more space or others. It's there, and we just have to kind of use it. Just from, because I understood like to kind of tell you a bit like how this tool kind of works and how you could also maybe use it. So all these projections that I showed you is publicly available on this website called Renewable. There's this repository, and there you can basically go in, download like a zip file with different folders for solar PV, heat pumps, and battery electric vehicles. And there's 3 different files because we do these projections for the total installed capacity that I just showed you before, but also for capacities per capita basically, so for 100 inhabitants, or also for the use potential. So you could really track this for the future. And however, they do not, how we provide them, they do not look like as figures. We really present them as really large data tables. And there you can basically like look up different municipalities, and here that's for example the Municipality of Geneva, which has a specific code, and you can look there in this one. And then the other interesting or relevant column are these quantiles, so that's this uncertainty code that I showed you before, and where you can see, okay, this median, so the most likely value will be the 0.51, and you're going to see this here, for example, and then you can read for a specific year, here like 2026, but it's also going on until 2050, there's going to be around like 13 megawatts installed in Geneva by 2026. And yeah, you can really scroll down and do this for all these different technologies, all these different municipalities, and so on and so forth. But this is kind of how you can use that. Just one thing, it's a bit like methodology, but I mean, other I think columns are probably not that interesting for you to read. It's really just some method facts just to track how it's been created. But also it comes to the point of, so here is a column saying, is it based on an average or is it based really on the municipality data? Because as you could probably imagine, there's like as there are more than 2,000 municipalities, there are also municipalities that probably do not have any solar PV installed yet, any heat pump or any battery electric vehicle. So for this we take some assumptions, long story short, on that we take a bit like assume there's going to be the average dynamics of other municipalities and then project that. So by this you can basically see it's not based on the actual data because it doesn't exist, or we cannot project it. So that there you can just like see, okay, this is probably taken a bit with a grain of salt because this is just based on a big assumption. All right, when we have all these municipalities together, we can aggregate them obviously to then say, okay, what do they make them all together if we add up all these values? And here we get to the total of Switzerland for solar PV. So it's really the same figure that you've seen before for the municipality of Thun, but just now for the total, if we add all values of all municipalities in Switzerland. And put some facts here just to read it a bit more easily. So by 2035, we project it's going to be 12.5 gigawatts that's going to be installed, and by 2050 around 23 gigawatts. And so this is really this line here, let's say, really this dark blue. However, here we do not have only one study that says how where we're going to be, but there's this energy perspectives, there's from the electricity providers, there's some studies. So there's really a wide range of when they say, okay, this is the installation we need by a specific year, or we would aim for. And you see here that this range can be really big. And I'm going to make a quick point on why this is the case, because we have a nice study on this, but I guess you also can understand that there's like uncertainty in the values or what we need to have in the future. So if we look at buildings with a heat pump, it's actually not growing that much, so it's really like a linear kind of projection that we have here that we see, and it's really far off from what is kind of needed in the future. However, here the point is for this heat pump data is really not good. It's not like this. It's like the building register of Switzerland, and no one really knows how up to date this is. If every information is there, so there's really high uncertainty in this. But from the information that we have from all the registered heat pumps that we know are there, this is how it's going to look like. But we do not know if there's some missing or if there's even too many, could also be. But yeah, so by 2050 we will not even reach 1 million buildings according to our projections. For battery electric vehicles, it's actually a bit more uncertain. So you can see really here, really this cone of uncertainty is really bigger, which is also because you can probably see here the historical data is not that long, because battery electric vehicles are not that long on the market. I mean, Switzerland is already kind of good, having a lot of battery electric vehicles compared to other countries, but the data set where it's been registered is not going back for too long. So that's why we have a lot of uncertainty, because we cannot really learn from the past. But also here, still kind of like it really looks like, okay, we're not going to have all the cars by 2050 being electrified. And yeah, as I said before, at the moment we have 6.9 gigawatts of solar PV, and we have around 400 buildings with a heat pump, and at the moment around 160,000 battery electric vehicles on Swiss streets. Here, just to also get a bit like the maps, because you've seen the maps before for 2023, so it's at the moment. And in the future, what we basically see is, okay, it's going to be similar than today from the term of what the pattern is going to be. So it's really going to be still that the middle region and the population centers. We say that so where a lot of cities are, where a lot of people live, that they will also have the highest capacities. I think I'll leave it like that. One comment, because I really like the study that I want to talk about now, a bit like this thing, why do we, like, for 2050, there's a range of, we need 14 gigawatts of solar PV or 42, so that's a really big range. So some people could say, okay, why don't we really know where we have to go? And that's what's a lot on, depending on weather variability and choosing technologies. And there's a master student of us who did a very nice study looking at trying to get the optimal for 2035, so modeling what do we need in 2035, depending on if we would assume different weather years of the past. So he looked at 1995 to 2019, and just by that, you could already see that the perfect mix for the different technologies can really be different depending on if it's a very sunny weather in the year, if it's very windy or not, or both, and so on and so forth. So you could really get to this kind of trade-off map, heat map, that you come up with, where you can basically check, okay, if we have a lot of solar PV, we wouldn't need that much of wind. But if we have much more wind, we would need less solar PV. But it's not a kind of either or, it's really different combinations. And what this heat map here shows is the more yellow it is, the more likely is it that it's actually also going to supply enough electricity in all the weather years. So he tested this 25 weather years. So if it's yellow, that means in all these different weather years, we would assume that it will always kind of supply enough electricity in the future in 2035. And if you're more going to the lower left, that means only like in 50% or even less cases of the weather years, you're actually gonna supply enough with installed capacities. So if you really want to be very kind of sure it always works, you would kind of see here and go on this slide to say, okay, we can either install like around like 37 gigawatts of solar PV, but if we really don't like solar PV, we could also like have less. But then we really also need more of wind. So here then you would really need, let's say, 18 gigawatts of wind. But that's really like the question in Switzerland, do we want to have wind or not? But if we don't want, we need more solar PV. And you could also add other technologies for sure, but we just here compare, for example, the solar PV and wind. And yeah, how it's at the moment is what we clearly see. There's a small dot here. I don't know if you already spotted this. This is how it looks at the moment. So at the moment, if we think of the future of 2035, and we keep the mix as it is at the moment, we would not have enough electricity being supplied in any of the years. Doesn't matter how the weather is. It's definitely not going to be enough in 2035. And why this is also like this big gap at the moment until then is because in this scenario we assume already that nuclear is not there anymore, right? So if nuclear would be there, it would be less, but in this case it's already out because yeah, it's kind of assumed by around that time nuclear won't be there anymore in Switzerland. So yeah, and you could also like really, I'm not going into detail here, but really have all this kind of saying, okay, different weather years, how and where most efficiently you would install solar PV or even wind. Here it's just solar PV, but there's also maps on wind. But yeah, I think it's really a nice study to communicate what the trade-offs are, and that there's no free lunch, and that there's high uncertainty, and that kind of then shows, okay, if we don't want to have, if we say this one is enough, if we say 14 gigawatts of solar PV will be enough by 2050, then think of the consequence, okay, but then we will also need a lot of PV or, a lot of wind power or other technologies in order to be able to do that. And yeah, I mean, I guess you're all kind of aware of this uncertainty and these trade-offs, but I also want to make the point here why it's kind of hard to probably say if it's realistic to reach a level. All right, one thing here I want to add is, I said we started this doing these models and these projections 2 years ago. And what's interesting now is because we updated it over the last 2 years every time. So this is how like everything I showed you is how it looks at the moment. But if we look back, how it was the year before, or with only data until 2021, we really see the last years for solar PV have been really good, and so they really help bringing up the projections. So while 2 years ago it looked like even less realistic to reach these levels, the last years, because solar PV has been really installed at a very good rate, or better rate, let's say, we're really getting closer to the values that we need. And this, I think, is really a promising signal, sign. And yeah, we haven't done this yet for the next year, but probably it's even going to get better. However, if we look at, for example, battery electric vehicles, it's actually still really uncertainty. It's really going up and down. So it was kind of okay 2 years ago. Then the projections were getting a bit more optimistic, but then actually in the latest update they're even getting a bit more pessimistic again, because the sales of the battery electric vehicles were actually not as expected, and they were like slowing a bit down. I can also show you this for heat pump, but you've seen already it's been like kind of linear, and so there's really been no changes in the updates. Exactly. Alright, then the last point, the European context. Really just, I'm not gonna talk about all the different countries. However, I want to focus a bit like on how kind of Switzerland performs in the European context, because there's a similar study that we did. It's basically a very similar approach, and so we also did projections, but not on municipality level in Switzerland, but really on national level in European countries, in up to 40 countries where we have these projections for. And basically here on this maps you can see in red the lowest installed capacities up to the highest capacities. So countries in green have the highest capacities comparatively in Europe. And just there's a bit of a confidence level also with it. So basically the more intense a color is, the more certain are we about that it's going to be this value in the future by 2050. But for example, for battery electric vehicles, it's really less uncertain, so it's like not as strong the color as you can probably see here. That's really just a list taking a bit of confidence into account. However, I was now talking about the total capacity, and yeah, you would have a point of view and now say, okay, yeah, well, Switzerland is not the biggest country in Europe, so obviously it's not going to have the highest capacities, likely. That's why there's different ways you can like normalize it basically to better compare. And there's a way where we could, for example, then have this capacity per capita, and for that. Still, Switzerland is kind of like for solar PV and heat pumps not having too much compared to other countries. However, probably also not very surprising because we see a lot of electric vehicles on the streets already. If we think that compared to like the size of the country, Switzerland is already kind of like in the middle in Europe. So actually, Germany where I'm from, where they love their cars, but also like a lot of mechanical engine and like really mechanical and combustion engine cars. There's per capita there's less battery electric vehicles than in Switzerland projected for 2050. Alright, just also not going into detail here, but just as I said, okay, we'll probably get here. In the same study, we have these projections that I've shown you before, just a bit of like different values here for what's going to be reached in the future. It's a European study that has these red dots of saying where we need to reach. Yeah, we have the solar PV also for heat pumps and battery electric vehicles, but we also will study, if you're interested, you can also look at a bit of other technologies. Obviously, offshore wind power doesn't exist and won't exist in Switzerland, so that's why it's not there. But for all these European countries, we would also have projections on national level. So yeah, you're happy to kind of look into that a bit into more detail. But what we kind of have here then created based on these projections is basically this mapping of how likely are these values that we have here, how likely will they be reached. And here actually for 2030 on this map you can see Switzerland's green, so based on this value it's actually going to reach this value quite likely. However, in the future it's more like it's about as likely as unlikely. It's kind of probably hitting there, but we are not very certain that for that value here in the future, because it's just a bit above of what we project as the darkest blue, so as the most likely value. And yeah, we have this for other different technologies, but here I just give this as an example for 2030 and 2040. Yeah. Alright, that's basically things I wanted to show. So just like the main takeaways on this. So yeah, based on the current dynamics and contextual conditions, and that's definitely something that we want to stress here. It doesn't take into account changes in policies in the future, but based on that, it is, like Switzerland is unlikely to reach most required levels of solar PV pumps and battery vehicles. So some, depending on the assumptions that you have on these values, it may be reaching that. But at the moment, it really looks like, okay, Switzerland really has to increase their efforts. However, what I showed you is, okay, although it's probably still unlikely, the trends of the last years of solar PV have been encouraging. So currently it's 23 gigawatts projected, so, and if we do another update, maybe it's even getting better. So I think that's really something to kind of keep an eye on. Maybe we're even getting there much quicker than we probably would have expected in the past. However, for heat pumps and battery electric vehicles, it's actually not the case. So there, it's really still not really reaching the levels, or doesn't matter when we updated the past projections. The highest capacities, as I said before, are projected to be near the population centers, so really large cities and so on and so forth. And just to put it in the European context, based on the current dynamics again and contextual conditions, most European countries are unlikely to reach these required levels. However, also here, solar PV, it's getting better, so we see in Europe there's this dynamics of solar PV. So that's basically it, but just if you want to give a bit of context, because I want to have kind of how you can maybe use also these methods again. I just want to kind of highlight again how you can use them and what's really to be aware of. So for decision makers who want to use these projections, it really helps for the overconfidence, and it's not good to have broad uncertainties without likelihoods, so that's why we have these probabilistic projections. I said this before, however, and that's the big point I want to make here, is it's really based on the current diffusion dynamics, and we do not know about policies in the future. That's what I said. However, at the moment, I'm going to keep it short here, that's what we working on at the moment, to see in how far policies get stronger, and here for Switzerland, can we actually get better projections for the future? So can actually policy have an impact on these projections that we have? The same for weaker policies, so it seems like it doesn't matter if we weaken policies, still it's not going to stop the dynamics, so it's already kind of set off that a lot of people will install PV. But yeah, that's why we're still in investigation. That's why I also don't want to kind of make too many points on this, because we are still developing and trying to get insights on this. But really, that's a different thing. These projections that we have at the moment cannot do this. So it will also be good to then combine probabilistic projections with scenarios to then really better understand of these projections and add it to these models that we see in the very first slide. Where we say, okay, this is where we need to get. If we can couple this better, we can probably get a better sense of probabilistic business. I think I leave it here because the rest I said. It's just some things to keep in mind. There definitely are some limitations of our work, but I think I've said this, and I think that's clear for you now. So I think I can stop here. Yeah, and that's it. So merci, and I'm happy to discuss with you further.
Thank you. Any question?
I have a question, because you said it's only probabilistic. So, how will you improve the models, incorporating big shifts in policies, like we may have in Geneva right now in the next week?
So there's two ways. I think for actually the policy, because I think there's two things. So and maybe this thing that we've currently been doing, we're currently investigating. We're investigating different policies that are on costs. So if policies kind of having subsidies or others that would kind of, so these effects, but also if one sets like clearer targets for something to reach, how these effects could be in these models, but it's a bit more indirect. For this thing for Geneva, I would even say this is extremely strong, because that's really something on, okay, everyone has to, and that's kind of, you know how it's gonna, like how it has to be, right? By 2035, if I'm not mistaken, like that everyone has to have it installed. By this, I think you could even say we do not really need projections, probably, because by this we could say, okay, if this is kind of law, everyone has to have it. There's still maybe some uncertainty.
We apply the law, but yeah.
Exactly. Like, but just like in this case of if it's applied, I think by this you could already kind of, I would argue, okay, then you could really just be direct and say, okay, we're gonna have some ramp up rates, so installation rates until the future to reach this target. But then this target is quite certain, so this is probably why I would say it's a bit different approaches. It's not that like one's either wrong or right, but I think in this one, I think it's really straightforward. I mean, it's really nice because then we could really plan, right? Because what we are doing at the moment is really in all this like uncertainty that we have, can we understand this better? Can we still help to better plan? Because the moment we do not know how it's going to be. We have this like kind of targets, let's add inverted commas for the future, for 2035, 2050 to be net zero. But still, we don't really know if we're actually getting there with this law. If it gets voted yes, and it's going to be actually in place. I think it's quite. I mean, it doesn't have to be that it's really going to. Like, there's still kind of always uncertainties and kind of loopholes, right? But I think for this, it's probably really good that we probably don't even need that.
Okay. Thanks.
Maybe I can try to ask a question.
Yeah.
It's for me, I'm not a specialist, so it's quite a lot of data, and I'm not sure if I really get this right. But
yeah, sure.
Do you have any simulations or any ways of factoring, for example, external factors such as the price of oil or things like that on the diffusion of technology in Switzerland? Because I guess the higher the price of oil, the more the people will turn to renewable.
Yeah. So in these projections, it's not there yet, kind of. What I just said before, we're trying a bit with costs, but how we did it so far is really more costs on installation and kind of really and kind of what's called like really electricity prices. So depending on how much I actually save if I have my own PV. So that's what we're doing, yeah. But exactly that's this kind of, I would say, a bit more like maybe secondary effect of probably oil prices, where that we don't have like explicitly in that. But it could be that you would, like one could argue, okay, this oil price has an effect probably also on the electricity price or other factors. It's a bit difficult to kind of say, okay, this is exactly how it will factor in. Then just like installation price, kind of, which is more clearer and more direct. But so in these projections it's not there. However, I think like this effect is a bit more modern really than this energy system model. So really what I said before, what I had in the first slide, these examples of where it's optimized of, okay, if these are the conditions, what is kind of the optimal mix? But it's then a bit more, okay, what's economically best? That would be on, and that's a lot what also my Evelina professor does, is really checking the accuracy of models. So, and then really checking these different factors of, okay, a lot of models are optimized on, okay, we will take the cheapest option, but in reality, countries do not always go with the cheapest option. They have some other things, and in this area, these factors are a bit more accounted for, but it's a bit of a different approach.
And maybe a second one, so you have quite a clear distinction between renewables and oil, the fossil fuels on the other hand. And when in your conclusion slide there is a summary saying that Switzerland is unlikely to reach the target by 2050. But I think the missing piece of what I did not get is how nuclear is considered, because of course this is not fully renewable or considered as so, nor this is a fossil fuel. So importing nuclear or putting new nuclear plants in Switzerland? Is it an option that you considered as a simulation, or is it excluded from the study?
Two things. So when I talked about this weather variability here, so this is really here. This is really an optimization, and there nuclear is really excluded. But that's really saying, okay, it kind of calculates the demand. So it says, okay, we need to have a specific amount. These projections that I just showed there, that's one kind of big downside is, and we also still want to work on, is it cannot account for system effects. So it basically treats all the technologies individually. So we really just look at the dynamics, how this technology grows, without external factors. So we cannot know what kind of role nuclear would be in there. Kind of the argument there is kind of it's also not relevant kind of that much, right? Because in a way the dynamics are or how it's driven at the moment is solar PV will grow like this if the conditions at the moment are the same. So that means kind of if nuclear doesn't change, kind of if kind of Switzerland decides, okay, we want to get back into nuclear, and then a lot of people say, okay, then it's also why I don't want to invest in solar PV, then it could have an impact. However, it's really like on this individual level, so it could be that still people say, because I still kind of, for our own savings, it's better to have solar PV, so not state-driven, let's say, or institution-driven. But yeah, so this is, but it's definitely one big kind of limitation that we don't have the systems effect in these projections. Yes.
Any other questions?
Well, in all your simulation, do you consider the climate change in terms of weather, specifically?
Yeah.
How do you integrate that in your models? Or
You mean that for the future, right? Because
well, normally it will be more. We have more sun or like we don't know yet.
Yeah. So this particular study is not dealing with that at all. Kind of, it really just looks at okay, if we just take the information that we already have, where we have 100% like uncertainty, we know how it's been in the past, and that's what this is. So it doesn't take climate into account. But I think it's still kind of really nice because it shows already, even if we look at this variability that we already had, so what we know about, we already kind of really have to like really be aware of this uncertainty. So it's a clear indication of saying, okay, we cannot just take a representative year to just say, okay, it's always going to be like 2019. No, please don't do that. But that's what a lot of models do. However, there's some colleagues, especially from ETH Zurich or others, that kind of for this weather years that we have used in the past, kind of assume, okay, we just take weather years that are kind of assumed to be weather years in the future, so where they take into account climate effects. So they do this. I cannot exactly tell you now kind of how it is, but it kind of shows you also about this variability. There's definitely less hydropower being available then under these scenarios. That's what I can definitely say. But I don't have a figure now where I could show this, but it kind of is the same kind of way of thinking. And the thing's really interesting research, but for that you have to have scenarios, because we do not really know how the weather is going to be in the climate conditions, right? There's different scenarios that we can take and that the people are modeling, which I think is really good to do that. But yeah, it's kind of even scenarios.
So yeah, kind of the same question about population, about the population growth.
Yeah.
So you take into account, or?
In these models, it's not. I mean, that's kind of for this optimization, actually, but it's not on the slide. Yes, it is taken into account, so that basically assumptions on how it's going to be in the future. These projection models that I had, they do not take this as changes, and also if maybe a lot of new buildings are built, they have to have solar PV, right? It can also be a bit different, right? However, in the project we also like this work was part of. It's called like Sweet Sure, and that's like Sweet is like one of these kind of funded research consortia projects by the Federal Office of Energy in Switzerland. And there's different projects, and there's the SURE, and it stands for Sustainability and Resilience. And there I'm part of this group where we look at different scenarios. We actually look like one of the scenarios is nuclear. If suddenly we see that we're gonna have nuclear again, or does it change all these status? There's also something with economic crisis and something else, and there's also something on population where they really look. Then the results are not there yet, but there's scenarios modeled of really if we're gonna get to 10 million inhabitants in Switzerland, or back to 8, or kind of that. But this is kind of all these different scenarios, and then kind of assess. But it's really then more scenarios, because it's often not, we don't really know how it's going to be. We can like say, okay, this one's what we assume is more the likely scenario, but it's all really kind of then scenarios in this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Nik.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation, and very nice tool, in fact.
Yeah,
very nice tool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're going to do another update this year. We still have to see, but kind of, yeah, it's all publicly available, and whenever you have questions, if some of you want to use that, let me know. Yeah.
It will be interesting to see how it evolves along the years, maybe in 5 years and so on. Are you going to keep it updated, or?
Let's see. The thing is, that's really also like calculation-wise, kind of what we say is expensive, because it needs to run a lot of things, and so far it was really much cheaper at the university to do that. Let's say, so that's why we are now thinking, okay, do we do this or not? I think definitely as long as I'm there, probably do this also then again this year. But yeah, I don't know, it's then always really depending a bit on how the budget is going to be the next years, if it's been updated then. But yeah, it's to be seen.
I understand that. Okay, thank you. Cool, thank you very much, I think.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.